We did it! Our bill to combat critical race theory here in Mississippi has now become law. The state governor has just signed off on it, and we now have legislation in place to combat this dangerous and divisive ideology. It's only a few weeks ago since the Mississippi Center for Public Policy published this report. This report, which we published in October, looked in detail at the evidence that critical race theory is being promoted here in Mississippi. We found lots of evidence to suggest that this divisive ideology is being promoted here in this state. And we produced a bill which we published at the back of this report, and I'm delighted that a piece of legislation that looks remarkably like what appeared in the appendix of our report has now become law. Now, critics of the bill will try to convince you that it prohibits the teaching of history. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think it's vitally important that in states, particularly states like Mississippi, we teach history honestly, and there is no attempt to airbrush the past. We think it's vitally important that young Mississippians are taught about the founding principles and the promise of America, but are also taught the reality, which is that all too often America has produced leaders and laws that fail to live up to that promise. That is absolutely essential. Our bill doesn't prohibit the teaching of history. It doesn't prohibit the teaching of the civil rights movement. On the contrary, I think our bill is absolutely consistent with the message of the civil rights movement. The message that all Americans are created equal, that all Americans should have the same rights and the same opportunities. Dr. Martin Luther King very famously said that all Americans should be judged on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin. That's why in our bill we say that teachers should not promote the idea that some Americans are inherently superior or inferior based on their immutable characteristics. I struggle to see how any decent person could possibly take issue with that. Our bill, I think, is more than just about combating critical race theory in Mississippi. I think our bill, which is entirely consistent with the idea of freedom and liberty, freedom of thought, and people's Bill of Rights, freedoms, our bill, I think, shows other states in America what it is that they can do to combat this dangerous and divisive ideology. Let's not look to Washington for the answers all the time. Let's not look to DC to combat this dangerous ideology. Let's look at the sort of things that Mississippi has now done to tackle this dangerous ideology head on. It's great news for Mississippi, and I think it's great news for the rest of America too.